I recently had to deal with something no police chief should ever have to say out loud. The HOA president's son tried to steal my car, and when I stopped him, he actually called the cops on me. His excuse: you weren't using it, so I could. The only thing that got stolen that day was his sense of entitlement. Let me back up. My wife, Maya, has a theory. For every square foot of immaculate lawn in a place like Oak Crest, there's an equal and opposite amount of madness lurking behind the doors. I used to think she was joking. After all, I'd spent 15 years staring down real evil as a homicide detective before I took the job as chief of police. True darkness didn't wear pastel golf shirts or grumble about mailbox colors, right? I thought suburban squabbles were beneath me. Turns out, I couldn't have been more wrong. It all began with a letter, cream-colored, tucked under the wiper of my freshly polished F-150 like a parking citation from the underworld. It looked official, overly formal. And of course it had a gold sticker shaped like an oak tree sealing it shut. "What's that?" Maya called from the porch, coffee cup in hand, suspicion already brewing in her expression. She has a look she gets right before the world does something ridiculous, a look that says she's ready with both a monologue and a mug. We'd moved to Oak Crest 8 months ago, chasing peace and a backyard. We got the yard, sure. Peace, not so much. The letter was a work of passive-aggressive art, a formal notice of violation. And our great crime, as per Section C, Paragraph 4 of the Community Bylaws, our 2 standard-issue dark green trash cans had been visible from the street for more than the allowed 12 hours after pickup. This was a Level 1 infraction. It warned, no fine this time, but next time, $50. Signed with an elaborate flourish by Karen Whitfield, HOA President. I read it aloud. Maya's face shifted from suspicion to disbelief to a fury so sharp it could cut steel. Visible from the street? She snapped. Daniel, the cans are behind the hedges. You'd need to be on stilts or be a professional busybody to spot them, or maybe a snooping giraffe. Which one's Karen? She grabbed the letter, her eyes scanning for the punchline that wasn't there. The garbage truck came yesterday at noon. It's 9 in the morning now. So, what? We're 9 hours over the sacred trash can limit. She let out a humorless laugh. I've had dentist appointments that were less painful. See? I tried to lighten the mood. No more armed robbery, just highly weaponized pettiness. She wasn't having it. Maya started pacing, the letter crumpled in her hand. That's who she was. Fiercely loyal, brilliant, and with a temper that could level buildings. We balanced each other. I was calm and methodical, she was fire and instinct. Together, we were solid. But this was uncharted territory. I'm going to find this Karen Whitfield, Maya declared, her eyes blazing, and I'm going to politely ask if her life is really so empty that she has to time the neighbors' trash cans. Whoa, let's not start a neighborhood war, honey, I said. Hands up. It's just a warning. We'll move the cans. It's stupid, but it isn't worth it. After years in law enforcement, I'd learned to pick my battles. A letter about trash cans? That didn't even register as a fight. Maya stopped pacing and looked at me, her head tilted. You don't get it, Daniel? This isn't about the cans. It's a test. They're poking at the new neighbors, the only black family on this block, to see what they can get away with. Today it's trash cans. Next, it'll be our lawn ornaments or the color of our door. Of course she was right. She almost always was. I'd seen this pattern too, as small provocations, testing the waters before pushing further. Okay, I sighed. You're right, but my way of handling it is to give them nothing. We move the cans, and this Karen will get bored and move on to scolding someone about their wind jumps. I genuinely believed that. Petty tyrants live for attention, deny it, and they fade away. Maya just shook her head, a wry smile flickering. My sweet, logical, hopelessly naive husband, she murmured, smoothing out the letter. You still think this is about logic? That there are actual rules? She tapped Karen's signature. People like this don't get bored, Daniel. They escalate. She folded the letter, slipping it back into its envelope. The heat of her anger cooled into something far more dangerous. Resolve. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was planning. And when Maya starts planning, the world had better watch its step. She glanced down our street, with its pristine lawns and trimmed hedges, a battlefield I hadn't even realized we'd stepped onto. I still thought it was a petty annoyance, something that would blow over. What I hadn't realized yet was that we hadn't just bought a new house. We'd moved on to a chessboard, and the other side had already made its opening move. It wasn't just about the good schools or the low crime rate, though I'd be lying if I said those weren't big factors, especially for a cop. But the real draw was something harder to explain. It was that moment you turned off the highway, drove under a tunnel of ancient oak trees, and felt the tension in your shoulders melt away. The city had been my life's work and my burden. It wore you down one tragedy at a time, 1,000 sad stories that followed you home. And I needed a place where the loudest sound at night was the hum of the fridge. We thought we'd found it in a 2-story colonial on a quiet cul-de-sac. Big backyard backing onto a patch of woods, a porch swing, and a garage that fit both my F-150 and my pride and joy, a fully restored 1967 Ford Mustang. That car wasn't just metal and rubber, it was a time capsule. Every bolt, every polished inch of chrome was a testament to patience, to doing something with your hands you could actually fix. Under that hood, I wasn't Chief Ray's juggling city budgets and internal affairs complaints. I was just Danielle, a man, a wrench, and a problem that stayed solved. For 8 months, life in Oakcrest was the escape we'd hoped for. Weekend barbecues, neighbors we could greet by name, even the local eccentric, neighbor Louie. Louie was in his late 60s, always in loud Hawaiian shirts, skin permanently sun-kissed. He'd pop up while I was watering plants or wiping down the Mustang, usually offering unsolicited wisdom. "Don't plant petunias," he once warned, tilting his head toward our flower beds. "Deer CM as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Marigolds instead, they hate the smell." Like disappointment to a deer, mostly harmless, I thought. Neighborhood color. We'd give him a beer and hear him out. It was Louis who first warned me about Karen Whitfield. One Saturday, I was polishing the Mustang's bumper when Louis wandered over, garden hose in hand. "That's a beauty," he said, nodding at the car. "Real American muscle. Around here, it's mostly beige. You've said beige, the official color of giving up." I laughed. "It keeps me out of trouble." Louis lowered his voice. "Speaking of troubly broken bar, you met the Queen yet?" "The Queen?" "Karen Whitfield, HOA president. Big white house on the corner, looks like a wedding cake. She runs this place like her private kingdom of beige. Writes rules about the rules. Cross her, and she'll measure your grass height with a laser level." He winked, but his tone was serious. "Keep your head down, pay the dues on time, and don't leave your recycling bin out a minute late." At the time, I chalked it up to neighborhood gossip. Every community has its self-important busybody. I figured Louis was exaggerating, but then came that letter, the one about the trash cans, and Louis's words stopped sounding like paranoia. Unsurprisingly, didn't take my let-it-go approach. While I tried to watch the game, she dove into the Oakcrest online forum, a digital swamp of passive-aggressive rants about dog poop and parking spaces. "Listen to this," she said, her face lit by the laptop screen. Her voice had that edgy her "I found something" voice. 3 months ago, the Patels on Elm Street got fined $200 for a non-approved holiday decoration. It was a Diwali wreath. "A wreath, Daniel?" I frowned. "That's ridiculous." "It gets better." Her fingers flew over the keys. "The Lees, 2 blocks over, got fined because their son's basketball hoop was supposedly an aesthetic blight on the community's visual harmony. They had that hoop for years. But guess what changed? 6 months ago, Karen became president. Suddenly, it's a problem." She looked at me, eyes sharp. "See the pattern, detective?" I saw it. The Patels were Indian, the Lees were Korean, and we were the only black family on the block. It wasn't just about trash cans, or wreaths, or basketball hoops. It was about someone using the bland language of bylaws to target families who didn't fit. My annoyance hardened into something colder. This wasn't petty, it was calculated. "So much for peace and quiet," I muttered, turning off the TV. The game didn't matter anymore. My sanctuary was under attack, and not by criminals with guns, but by something more common and, in its own way, more dangerous. A bigot with a binder of rules. My training kicked in. Even an unofficial investigation needs facts and evidence. And I had a gut feeling, The trash can letter was only Karen Whitfield's opening move. Her kingdom of beige likely hid more than manicured lawns, and I intended to find out exactly what. And just like that, my wife and I had stumbled onto the key. The question wasn't whether we'd fight anymore, it was how. The real turning point and the spark that lit this Cold War into a full-blown blaze came on a Saturday so perfect it made you almost forgive winter for existing. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. A soft breeze stirred the oak leaves overhead. I had the garage door rolled up, giving the Mustang its weekly worship. The sun danced across its freshly waxed cherry red paint, and for a few peaceful minutes, the world made sense. Maya was inside, probably turning our whole battle plan into a color-coded flowchart. Strategist that she was. Old soul music crackled on the radio. My hands were covered in wax. Everything felt right. Then I saw him, a kid 18, maybe 19, strolling down the sidewalk like he owned every inch of it. Popped collar polo, khaki shorts, bowed shoes with no socks. His swagger was half intimidation, half bad theater. He stopped at my driveway and just stared at the Mustang, sneer firmly in place. I recognized him immediately. Bryce Whitfield, Karen's kid, the neighborhood's resident crown prince, known for loud parties, speeding through the cul-de-sac, and walking around like nothing could touch him. I gave him the bare minimum neighborly nod. "Afternoon," I said, keeping my tone polite, neutral. He ignored it. His eyes drifted over the car, then over me, then back to the car. The sneer deepened, and in that look, I saw it. Him noticing my brown skin, my grease-stained hands, and deciding I didn't belong next to something he considered his birthright. "Nice car," he finally said. But it wasn't a compliment, it was an accusation. He stepped up the driveway, hands shoved in his pockets, closing the distance. "Funny thing," he drawled, "my dad used to have one just like this. A '67 Mustang, cherry red." My instincts kicked in. Years on the job teach you to read people, and this kid was radiating the kind of cocky entitlement that usually ends with handcuffs. "Say someone else's, never his, is that so?" I kept my voice even, still polishing. "A classic, a lot of folks had them." "Yeah," he said, taking another step, fingers brushing the freshly waxed fender, leaving a smear. My eye twitched. "But this one? This one's ours." He locked eyes with me, the sneer sharpening into something ugly. "Don't know how you got it, but my mom's the HOA president. We run things around here, so how about you give me the keys?" For a moment, my brain refused to process what I just heard. It felt like a squirrel had asked me to co-sign a mortgage. The sheer audacity was almost funny. "Almost, son," I said, my voice going cold, dropping an octave. "You're on my property. You just put your filthy hand on my car, and you're saying some of the stupidest things I've heard in my entire life. Turn around and walk away before this gets embarrassing." He didn't blink, just smirked. "Look, immigrant," he spat, the word dripping venom. "I'm not asking. My mom told me if I ever saw this car, to take it back. So keys now," and that was it. The line. Before I could speak, a voice shrieked down the street, "Bryce, get away from him. He's dangerous." Karen Whitfield came power walking toward us, tennis whites glowing, visor perfectly perched, phone in hand like a weapon. "Mom, relax," Bryce shot back, eyes still locked on mine. "I'm just getting our car back." Karen reached us, face twisted into a performance of panic worthy of community theater. She threw an arm in front of Bryce, shielding him from me. The 5'4" monster gently wiping his own car on his own driveway. "I've got 911 on the phone," she shrieked, brandishing it at me. Then, into the speaker, "Yes, there's a suspicious male at 142 Oak Drive. He's trying to steal our car." My son confronted him, and I think he might be armed. "He's aggressive. Please hurry." For a moment, I just stood there, speechless. This was actually happening. This woman had just called the police and told them the black man in his own driveway was a car thief. The sheer galaxy-brained racism of it all was almost mesmerizing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Maya at the door, phone up, recording. My smart, relentless, always ready wife. I didn't say a word, just crossed my arms and waited. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Karen looked triumphant, convinced she'd won. In her mind, the local cops were her private security detail, about to haul me off for the crime of existing where she didn't want me. She had no idea who I was, no idea what she just triggered. The sirens turned the corner. 3 squad cars pulling up with lights flashing, sirens dying to a final wail, and just like that, the game changed. Karen Whitfield had handed me the ball and didn't even know it. The squad cars screeched to a stop at sharp angles in front of my house, blocking off the quiet street like it was a crime scene from a TV show. It was a full-blown felony-level response, and for a moment, seeing it from the outside, I almost understood the spectacle. A peaceful suburban block, a gleaming muscle car, and a panicked white woman pointing an accusing finger at a large black man. It was a tableau as old and ugly as America itself. 6 of my officers spilled out, hands hovering near their holstered weapons, eyes scanning for the supposed threat. Karen Whitfield seized the moment. She stepped into the center of it all, her voice rising into a trembling, dramatic crescendo. "Thank God you're here," she cried, pointing straight at me. "That man stole our car. It was my late husband's. My son Bryce recognized it, and when he tried to take it back, the man threatened us. You need to arrest him right now." Leading the team was Officer Miller, young but sharp, with a calm head on his shoulders. His gaze landed on me and in an instant, recognition dawned. His stance softened, confusion taking over as he blinked like he couldn't trust his eyes. One by one, the other officers followed suit. Sergeant Chen shook his head in disbelief. Officer Davis's mouth dropped open slightly. "Chief," Miller finally managed, his voice uncertain. "What a broken bar, what's going on?" I offered him a small, tired smile. "Afternoon, Miller." "Chen, Davis, beautiful day, isn't it?" "Wassa until this little misunderstanding." Karen's gaze flickered between me and the officers, her earlier smug certainty cracking. "Chief?" she repeated, the title coming out sharp and scornful. "What are you talking about? He's a car thief. Arrest him." Bryce, meanwhile, emboldened by his mother's performance, decided this was his moment. While everyone's attention was locked on the surreal standoff, he lunged for the Mustang. "I'll get it," he yelled, grabbing for the driver's side handle. It was the single dumbest move he could have made. Officer Davis reacted immediately. "Sir, get away from the vehicle," he barked, closing in fast. Bryce, startled, stumbled backward and tripped over his own boat shoes, landing flat on my lawn. Under any other circumstances, it might have been funny. I turned back to Miller, slipping into the voice I used behind a podium or in a briefing room, the voice of the chief. "Miller," I said calmly, "this woman, Karen Whitfield, knowingly filed a false police report, a racially motivated one. She claimed I stole this car, which, as you know, is registered to me, Daniel Reyes, at this address. Her son just attempted to unlawfully enter my vehicle. Your body cameras should have everything." I saw Miller's jaw tighten as the reality sank in. He and the entire team had been dragged into this, their time and authority hijacked by a woman's petty, racist vendetta. His expression hardened as he turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now cool and official, "is this true? Is this car not yours?" Karen's face contorted, the smugness dissolving into something like horror. "Well, no, but it looks just like ours." And he was acting so suspicious as she stopped, realizing just how pathetic she sounded. "So you called in a car theft, possibly armed, knowing full well it wasn't yours?" Miller pressed, his voice cutting through her excuses. "You do realize filing a false police report, especially a racially motivated one, is a serious crime?" While Miller spoke with her, Sergeant Chen and Officer Davis helped a now whimpering Bryce to his feet. Chen, his voice low and edged with disbelief, asked, "So you tried to take a car you don't own, right in front of 6 cops?" Bryce just stared at the grass, every ounce of earlier swagger gone. Across the lawn, I caught sight of Maya on the porch, her arms folded, phone in hand. She'd filmed everything. The neighbors had started peeking from behind curtains, pulled by the flashing lights and shouting, catching a front row seat to the spectacular collapse of Karen Whitfield's little reign. Miller made the call. "Davis, cuff him," he ordered, nodding at Bryce. "Attempted grand theft auto." Then he turned back to Karen, pulling out his ticket book. "Ma'am, You're being cited for filing a false police report. You'll receive a summons. I'd advise getting a lawyer." The metallic click of handcuffs closing around Bryce's wrists was oddly satisfying. Karen gasped, watching her son being led toward the squad car. She shot me a hatred and humiliation boiling in her eyes. She had lost, spectacularly. She'd tried to wield power she thought was hers by default, only to watch it backfire in public. As my officers started wrapping up, Miller came over, guilt on his face. "Chief, I'm sorry. We didn't know. You did your job." "Miller," I reassured him, patting his shoulder, "you came when called and handled it once you saw the truth." I glanced back at Karen, beaten, supported now by a neighbor who looked as stunned as everyone else. But I knew this wasn't the end. People like her didn't take humiliation as a lesson, they took it as a challenge. This had been the first battle, and a very public one. As she shot me a final look of venom before disappearing into her house, I knew the real war for Oakcrest had only just begun. In the days after the Mustang incident, the neighborhood settled into a strange, uneasy quiet. The sirens had barely faded before the gossip began. Clusters of neighbors gathered on sidewalks, their conversations dying whenever I passed. Some offered me quick nods or awkward thumbs up. Others just stared, as if I were a dangerous curiosity that had wandered into their suburban exhibit. Karen Whitfield, meanwhile, disappeared behind her blinds. Her house seemed to shrink inward, curtains drawn at all hours. But I knew better than to think she was reflecting on her actions. People like Karen don't learn from humiliation, they ferment in it. Maya, on the other hand, was on fire. "This is our moment," she urged, pacing the living room. "She's wounded. We have to finish her, get her off the hoe board." "I know," I sighed, sinking deeper into my chair. "But how?" "Being a venomous bigot isn't grounds for removal, and not even in ho." Still, my mind was already turning. The false police report was something. The rumors Maya had collected online were something else. But it wasn't enough. To topple someone as entrenched as Karen, we'd need more than outrage. We'd need proof, something undeniable. "Someone that arrogant doesn't follow the rules," I muttered, almost to myself. "There has to be more." And so, I did what I do best. I started digging. As a homeowner, I had the legal right to review the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes. So I drafted a formal, carefully worded email to the HOA's general account requesting the past 2 years of financial statements, vendor contracts, and minutes. I CC'd the entire board, a small move that forced them to acknowledge their request. At first, silence. A week passed, then a curt reply from the treasurer, "Gerald, my request was under review." A classic stall tactic. But they didn't know who they were stalling. I followed up with another email, this time quoting the specific state laws that guaranteed homeowner access to HOA records and pointedly reminded them that ignoring the law had consequences. The next day, a link landed in my inbox, a password-protected folder packed with PDFs and spreadsheets. They thought they'd called my bluff, but now, it was time to see what cards they were really holding. For the next 3 nights, Maya and I turned the dining room table into our war room. We hunched over laptops, coffee mugs leaving circles on the wood, scrolling through endless columns of numbers. It was numbing work, landscaping invoices, pool maintenance, insurance renewals. Everything, at first glance, seemed dull and legitimate. "Maybe there's nothing here," I muttered on the second night, rubbing my temples. "Maybe she's just a racist tyrant with clean books." "No," Maya shot back, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Keep looking. The devil's in the details, and this woman practically leases real estate in hell." She was right. The breakthrough came late on the 3rd night. Cross-referencing budget approvals with actual payments, I spotted something odd. Community security patrols at almost $5,000 a month, approved 6 months ago, right after Karen took over the board, supposedly in response to rising vandalism. The vendor, HOA Secure Solutions LLC. The name smelled wrong, too generic, too perfectly tailored to our subdivision. I pulled up the state's business registry. HOA Secure Solutions had been formed just 7 months ago. And the registered agent? Pamela Whitfield. Karen's sister. "Maya," I whispered, turning my laptop to face her. "I think I found it." Maya's eyes widened. "She's paying her sister $5,000 a month, That's a massive conflict of interest. Did she even tell the board? I checked the minutes from the meeting where the contract was approved. Nothing, just a note that Karen had solicited 3 bids and chose the most cost-effective option, a flat-out lie. In 6 months alone, she'd funneled $30,000 soon to be $40,000 straight to her sister. This wasn't just petty misconduct, it was embezzlement. But there was worse. The invoices included patrol logs and hours worked by security agents. Most had names blacked out for privacy, but on the earliest invoice, Karen had slipped. The names were visible. There, in plain text, were the patrol staff we were paying so dearly for. Bryce Whitfield and 3 of his friends. Karen hadn't just steered money to her sister's shell company, she had created a slush fund to pay her own delinquent son and his buddies to patrol the neighborhood of very likely the same kids responsible for the vandalism she'd used as justification to approve the contract. It was elegant in its depravity: manufacture a crisis, then get paid to solve it, using other people's money. I leaned back in my chair, a cold knot of fury settling in my chest. This wasn't a petty neighborhood power trip. This was organized theft. Karen Whitfield had turned the HOA treasury into her family's private ATM. And now, I had the proof. The only question left was what to do next. There's a protocol for things like this. But the man whose wife had been insulted, whose home had been threatened, wanted something else entirely. The evidence sat between us on the dining room table like a live bomb. Every invoice, every shell company, every redacted name, another piece of the payload. Maya and I sat in the stillness of our home, the weight of what we'd uncovered pressing down on us both. We had her, Karen Whitfield, caught dead to rights, and not just in moral failing, but in actual crimes: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The path forward seemed obvious, and that's when it got complicated. We destroy her, Maya said, her voice a low, fierce whisper. The protective fire in her was fully lit now, unyielding. We take this to the next home meeting. We stand up in front of everyone and burn her little kingdom to the ground. Humiliate her so completely she can never show her face here again. There was a righteous fury in her eyes, and God help me, the husband in me wanted it too. I wanted to see the look on Karen's face when the walls came crashing down. I wanted her to feel, even for a moment, the anger, fear, and humiliation she'd inflicted on us and so many others. But the other part of me, the part with a badge and a promise to keep it, was screaming. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was a criminal case. It had to be handled correctly, by the book, without any hint of revenge. If I, the chief of police, turned this into a very public, very personal reckoning against a neighbor who had wronged me, I'd cross a bright, dangerous line. Even someone as vile as Karen Whitfield was still a private citizen. Her lawyer, and she'd hire a damn good Donia, would paint me as a disgruntled neighbor abusing my power to settle a personal score. It could taint the entire case. She could walk. I can't do it that way, honey, I said, my voice low, heavy. I saw the flash of disappointment in her eyes. If I do what you're suggesting, it becomes about me, I explained. About revenge. Her lawyer would have a field day. They'd argue I poisoned the investigation, and she could go free. So what? Maya shot back, voice rising. We just dump it on the DA's desk and hope they do something? Daniel, you know how this works. It could sit in some file for months or years. She'd stall, lawyer up, and meanwhile she'd still be here, running the HOA, spending our money, hurting more people. We were at a crossroads, right there in our living room. Maya's way was swift, fiery, and emotionally satisfying. Mine was slower, methodical, professional, and deeply unsatisfying. Part of me wanted to stand beside my wife and watch Karen's empire burn. But the cop in me knew true justice doesn't come from spectacle. It comes from building a case so tight, so clean, no one can tear it apart. There's a third way, I said slowly, a plan taking shape in my mind. We don't just hand the DA a folder of documents. We build the entire case for them. Witness statements, a timeline, financial analyses, the whole thing, gift-wrapped, so solid they have no choice but to act, and act fast. But it has to be clean, I added. It can't come from my office. It has to come from the community. Maya's expression softened, the anger giving way to calculation. Other victims, she murmured. The Petals, the Lees. But they were too scared to fight back then. They were alone back then, I said. They wouldn't be now. But I can't go to them directly, it would look like pressure from the chief of police. She nodded slowly. So who does? Then the answer clicked into place. Someone everyone trusts, I said. Someone who's lived here forever, who isn't intimidating. Someone who warned me about Karen from the start. A slow smile spread across Ma Yu's face. Neighbor Louis. Exactly. Louis, with his goofy jokes and garden full of prize marigolds. People liked Louis. They talked to Louis. If he approached them not as a cop, but as a concerned neighbor, they might open up. The next day, I found him outside, pruning his flowers. I told him a sanitized version, that I discovered financial irregularities in the HOA books, and I believed Karen was abusing her power and targeting certain families. I never mentioned my badge. I was just Daniel Reyes, his neighbor. Louis listened quietly. His usual smile faded, replaced by something grim and hard. I knew it, he muttered, snapping the head off a marigold with surprising force. I always knew she was a crook, Louis said, his voice darkening in a way I'd never heard before. Just had a feeling, that woman's got a soul like a shriveled up raisin. He fixed me with a sharp look, suddenly sharper than his usual goofy neighbor routine. The petals and that the Wally wreath, the broken bar, the leaves, the basketball hoop. Old Mrs. Henderson, fined $200 because her cat was sitting on her own porch. A cat? It's always the same folks. He didn't need to say the rest out loud. People who weren't white, people Karen knew wouldn't fight back. I've got the financial proof, I told him. But I need people, I need their stories, on record, to show a pattern. Louis nodded slowly. Something settled over him, a quiet resolve that made him look less like a chatty retiree and more like someone who'd been waiting a long time for this moment. Leave it to me, he said, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. I'll make some house calls. It's time the kingdom of beige had itself a revolution. As I walked back home, a cautious relief washed over me. We had a plan, and it was the right way, methodical, by the book, driven by the victims, not by me. For the first time, I felt like I'd truly passed a test between being a husband and being a chief of police. But as I watched Louis put away his garden shears and stride purposefully down the street toward the Petals' house, a small knot of unease settled in my gut. I had just handed a crucial piece of our plan to the neighborhood gossip. I was betting the entire case on the hope that Louis really was who he seemed. For 2 weeks, everything played out almost perfectly. It turned out Louis wasn't just a gossiper, he was a quiet diplomat. He knocked on doors, sat at kitchen tables, and listened. He spoke gently, shared his own stories, and made the others feel safe. Families who'd been too afraid to speak, like the Petals, the Lees, and half a dozen more, slowly agreed to give written statements. Their silence, born of fear and shame, started to crack under the warmth of shared outrage and solidarity. Meanwhile, Ma Ya and I worked late into the night, cross-referencing fines with bogus security complaints, lining up dates and documents, and condensing years of evidence into a single, undeniable narrative. We built charts, timelines, and a summary even a distracted jury could follow. By the end, what we had wasn't just suspicion, it was proof. Solid, damning proof. The annual home meeting was just a week away. That would be our moment, a motion of no confidence, backed by a petition signed by a quarter of the homeowners, and a meticulously documented case for Karen's removal. It would be public, but it wouldn't be about me. It would be the community speaking, clean, by the book. And that's when Karen struck back. She must have sensed the walls closing in, and instead of fighting legally, she chose something simpler and uglier. At 2 in the morning, Ma Ya and I were jolted awake by a loud crash at the front of the house. My heart pounded as instinct took over. I rolled out of bed, Ma Ya right behind me, and crept to the living room window. In the yellow wash of the streetlights, I saw them, 4 figures in dark hoodies moving through our yard. One sprayed a thick, ugly red stripe across our garage door, another hurled a rock straight through the front picture window, glass exploding across the hardwood. And then I saw the real target. 2 of them stood over my cherry red Mustang in the driveway. One poured what looked like paint stripper across the hood, the paint blistering and bubbling in seconds. The other raised a crowbar and smashed it down on the windshield. A white-hot rage surged through me. That car wasn't just Metalla, it was my therapy, my escape, my bit of calm in a storm. But this wasn't just about the car anymore. This was my home, my wife. They'd brought violence right to our doorstep. My hand flew to the nightstand where my service weapon was locked. For a moment, just a single, terrifying moment, the chief of police and me disappeared. All that was left was a furious husband who wanted to storm outside and end it right then and there. Daniel, Ma's voice cut through the roar in my head. She grabbed my arm, her grip tighter than I'd ever felt. Don't you dare. That's exactly what they want. They want you to look like the aggressive cop from Karen's 911 calls. She pulled me back from the window. We have cameras, remember? She was right. My rational brain clawed its way back to the surface, pushing down the anger. Months ago, after Karen's first letter, I'd installed state-of-the-art security cameras around the property. We had 4 high-definition cameras covering every angle of the property. Small, discreet, but they saw everything. The vandals thought they were hidden by darkness, but really, they were starring in their own crystal-clear surveillance film. And I stayed back, away from the new gaping hole in our window, and watched. They were amateurs, loud, cocky, clumsy. They thought they were terrorizing us. After a few more minutes of pointless destruction, they ran laughing down the street. The silence that followed was worse, broken only by the faint hiss and drip of paint stripper burning through my car's hood. The fury still burned inside me, hot, sharp, but it hardened quickly into something colder and sharper. Resolve. I didn't call 911. I didn't want patrol cars at my house. Didn't want to be the chief who couldn't keep order on his own street. Instead, I went straight to my office, pulled up the security footage, and rewound. There they were, lit up in infrared, 4 young men, faces unmasked when they first stepped into view. As I zoomed in, my heart slammed against my ribs. Bryce Whitfield and the same 3 friends whose names I'd seen on the security invoice, Karen's private goon squad. They weren't just random punks vandalizing my home, they were on the clock. Crest Secure Solutions was being paid with our HOA to destroy our property. I've got them, I whispered. Ma stood behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder. I've got them all. They thought they were sending a message of fear. Instead, they'd handed me the final, most devastating piece of evidence, time-stamped, high-definition proof of their crime, captured by the system I'd quietly installed months ago. The rage didn't disappear, it just transformed. It wasn't wild or reckless anymore. It was disciplined, methodical, and absolutely lethal. The crossroads was behind me now. My course was set. This wasn't just about removing Karen. It was about tearing down every rotten part of her little empire, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. The annual home meeting was in 2 days. We had everything, financial records, witness statements Louis had gathered, and now, the crowning evidence, he had a video of Bryce and his crew smashing my Mustang and spraying my garage door, while being paid from HOA funds. The case wasn't just solid, it was airtight, bomb-proof. The day before the meeting, I sat in my office doing a final review. The damning video played on my screen. I watched, frame by frame, as Bryce raised the crowbar over the Mustang's windshield. That's when I caught something, a detail I'd missed before, blinded by anger the first time. As Bryce's friends scattered, running back toward the street, another figure slipped briefly into frame, half hidden under the branches of a large oak. At first it was just a silhouette, but then the figure stepped forward into the pale wash of a distant streetlight. They were holding a phone to their ear, watching the vandalism unfold. A sick, twisting feeling formed in my gut. I zoomed in, enhancing the image as far as it would go. The figure was shorter, wiry. Even in night vision, the pattern of the shirt stood out, bright, floral, and unmistakably a Hawaiian shirt. My pulse spiked. It couldn't be. It had to be coincidence. Hands trembling, I cross-referenced the video timestamp at 2:14 a.m.a. with my phone's call log. At that exact moment, I had a missed call from Louis. I'd assumed he was calling to warn me, having heard the noise, but the video told a different story. Louis wasn't at home. He was standing down the street, phone in hand, watching, supervising. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. The friendly, harmless neighbor, the gossip, the helpful organizer. It had all been an act, a brilliant, perfectly executed deception. My mind started racing back over every conversation, every suggestion, every casual piece of insider information he'd offered. His eagerness to help, his detailed knowledge of Karen's tactics. He hadn't been helping me expose her, he'd been managing me, steering me. But why? What was his endgame? I pulled up the financial records again, forcing myself to steady my breathing. This time, I wasn't looking for Karen's crimes alone. I was hunting for something deeper, another layer, another set of fingerprints. We had 4 high-definition cameras covering every angle of the property. Small, discreet, but they saw everything. The vandals outside were stumbling around in the dark, oblivious to the fact they were starring in their own high-def film. And I stayed back, away from the fresh, gaping hole in our window, and watched them. They were amateurs, loud, reckless, convinced they were scaring us into silence. After a few more pointless minutes of destruction, they bolted down the street, laughing like idiots. The silence that followed was worse, broken only by the faint hiss and drip of paint stripper eating through the hood of my car. The rage inside me was still there, a hot coal lodged in my chest, but it had cooled, hardened into something sharper, resolve. I didn't call 911, I didn't want a squad car showing up at my house again, didn't want to look like the chief who couldn't keep order on his own street. Instead, I went straight to my office, pulled up the live feed, and rewound. There they were, 4 young men, caught crystal clear under the infrared night vision. As I zoomed in, my heart slammed against my ribs. Bryce Whitfield and the same 3 names I'd seen on the security invoice, Karen's private strike team. They weren't just random vandals, they were on duty, paid through HOA Crest Secure Solutions, paid with our HOA dues to vandalize my property. I've got them, I murmured. Maya stood behind me, her hand warm on my shoulder. I've got them all, the destruction of my car, the violation of our home. It was supposed to intimidate us, force us to back down, but it failed completely. Instead, they'd handed me the final, irrefutable piece of evidence, time-stamped, high-definition proof of their own crime, delivered straight to my hard drive. The fury still burned, but it was no longer wild and blinding. Now it was cold, focused, and deadly precise. The moral crossroads was already behind me. My path was clear. This wasn't just about taking Karen down anymore. It was about tearing apart her entire rotten machine, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to salvage. The annual home meeting was in 2 days. We had everything, financial documents, witness statements Louis had collected, and the crown jewel of the video of Bryce and his crew trashing my property while on the payroll of Karen's fake security company. My case wasn't just strong, it was airtight, hermetically sealed and bomb-proof. The day before the meeting, I sat in my home office, going over the evidence one last time, making sure every detail was ready. On my screen, the video played frame by frame, Bryce, crowbar in hand, shattering the Mustang's windshield. Then I saw it, something small, almost insignificant, something my anger had blinded me to the first time. As Bryce's friends scattered back down the street, another figure stepped briefly into the frame, half hidden by the shadow of an oak. At first it was just a silhouette, but then they moved slightly into a patch of light. They were watching my house, and they were on the phone. A chill crawled up my spine. I zoomed in, enhancing the image as far as it would go. Short, wiry build, and even in the night vision, the pattern of the shirt was unmistakable, bright, floral, a Hawaiian shirt. It couldn't be. My stomach knotted. It had to be coincidence. Heart pounding. I checked the timestamp, 2:14 a.m. Then I looked at my call log. At that exact moment, I had a missed call because my phone was on silent, from Louis. At the time, I thought he was calling to warn me, but the video told a different story. He wasn't at home, reacting to the noise. He was standing down the street, phone in hand, watching, supervising. The realization hit like a gut punch. The friendly, harmless neighbor, the eager helper, the revolutionary voice pushing everyone to fight. It was all an act, a brilliant, carefully orchestrated lie. My mind started racing, replaying every conversation, every tip, every piece of information he'd fed me, his warnings about Karen, his perfect timing, his eagerness to dig through records and help rally the neighbors. He wasn't fighting her, he was using me. But for what? What was his endgame? Hands trembling, I opened the financial files again. This time, I wasn't looking just for Karen's fraud. I was searching for a different pattern, a deeper connection, another name hidden in the shadows. She went white as a sheet, stammering, trying to deny Ida, but her voice drowned in the uproar. But that's not all, I shouted over the noise. The room hushed. I raised my phone. 2 nights ago, these same employees Bryce Whitfield and his friends came to my home and did this. I connected the phone to the projector, the screen filled with high-definition footage. 4 boys, sneering and laughing as they smashed my car and wrecked my property. The room watched in stunned silence. Karen let out a strangled sob. It was over for her, but this was just the opening act. I paused the video. My eyes moved from the frozen image of her son on the screen to Karen's crumbling face. Then I slowly turned and pointed to the back of the room straight at Louis. "The thing is, Karen," I said, my voice dropping, suddenly calm, "I don't think this was your idea. It's a clever scam, but a little too smart for you. You're greedy and prejudiced, but you're not a mastermind. You're a puppet." Every head turned to Louis. His folksy smile vanished, replaced by the wide-eyed panic of a deer in headlights. I started down the center aisle toward him. "I think the real mastermind," I said, louder now, "is someone who's been here a long time, someone who knows all the secrets, someone who was already stealing from the HOA just a little at first. $500 a month for so-called horticultural consulting, for years." Louis's eyes darted around, searching for an exit. "And then," I continued, voice rising, "when Karen got elected, you saw an opportunity. You blackmailed her, forced her to build a bigger scam, so you could take your quota while she took all the risk. You used her like a tool." I stopped the video and switched to the next clip, an enhanced, zoomed-in shot of Louis in his flamingo shirt, standing in the shadows, phone pressed to his ear, watching my home being vandalized. "You even supervised the vandalism, didn't you, Louis, just to make sure your boys got it right?" The room went deathly silent. The truth of its ugliness hung heavy in the air. Seeing a lifeline, Karen found her voice at last. "He did," she shrieked, her finger trembling as it pointed at Louis. "He made me. He found out about a broken bar things, and threatened to expose me if I didn't do what he said." It was all him. That was all Louis needed to hear. His world caved in. His eyes flicked from the main door to the emergency exit. Then he bolted, shoving an elderly woman aside, slamming the crash bar, and bursting into the night. Chaos exploded behind him. People screaming about "I'd planned for this." 2 off-duty officers, friends of mine, moved fast. In seconds, they were on him. It wasn't some cinematic chase, just a desperate, stumbling run across the community center lawn. They tackled him near the tennis courts. I walked outside, calm, and watched them cuff him. Louis, the great puppet master, the king of Begia, panting, weeping in his flamingo shirt, broken. The showdown was over. Justice, in all its messy, complicated glory, had finally arrived in Oakcrest. 6 months later, Oakcrest felt transformed. The sun seemed brighter, the air lighter. Peace had finally taken root, earned, not imposed. The fallout had been swift. State investigators showed up with a suspiciously complete case file. Louis confessed to everything: blackmail, extortion, conspiracy. His Hawaiian shirts were traded for a prison jumpsuit. Karen cooperated. She got probation and a hefty fine, selling her gaudy house to repay the $40,000 she and Louis had stolen. Every bogus fine was refunded. The Whitfields moved out quietly in the night. Even Bryce and his crew faced justice tried as adults, ordered to pay damages. That check restored my Mustang. It looked brand new, but to me, it was something more. A survivor. Like us. Ma yet joined me on the porch swing, handing me a polished piece of chrome. "The board just approved the community garden," she said with a proud, quiet smile. She'd been elected HOA president reluctantly at first, but now ran it with common sense and heart. The rules got simpler. The neighbors grew closer. The community finally felt like one. I looked at her, the brilliant, fiery woman who'd seen the fight coming before I did, and I thought of the question that had haunted me all year. Can a good man stay good under pressure? I think I did. We didn't just tear down a broken system, we built something better. To us, Maya said, raising her glass, to peace and quiet. We clinked our glasses, and for the first time, the silence truly held.